So I want to start with a big idea, and then we'll look at just one little thing, and maybe some other day where more people are available, we could do like another topic also if we want. Sorry, I can pass these. You guys, so I used to work for Hillel in their international center, and the director of fundraising and development had this first line on the source sheet as the tagline in his signature block. And it says, "The Almighty has willed that there be two hands in the matter of charity, one that gives and one that receives. Be thankful that yours is the one that gives." And it's from Sefer Hasidim. And I think that is a good perspective to go into any conversation about tzedakah on, and also to recognize that like it's sometimes hard to be the hands that receives. And all of us probably can give and receive at different levels in this room and in our broader community. And Rabbi Sachs talks a lot about the idea that the Rambam teaches that even if you received tzedakah, you should also give tzedakah. So your hand can be one that receives, but should always be one that also gives. And I think that that's like an important value to frame any tzedakah conversation, is to think about how we give and receive within a community to allow for everyone to have both opportunities. Okay, so the founding psukim or principles for tzedakah come from Devarim, Perek Tet Vav, Pasuk Zayin and Chet, where the Torah acknowledges that there will be people who need to receive it within you. Ki yebecha avyon me'achad achacha ve'achad sharecha b'artzecha asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha lo ta'amet et lavavcha ve'lo tikpot et yadcha me'achicha ha'avyon. Right, and so if there is a needy person among you where you live, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kinsman. I think that is surprising language to talk about your heart when you're thinking about tzedakah. It's not like obvious. And then rather, ki patach tiftach et yadcha v'lo v'ha'avet ta'avitenu de machsaro asher yachsar lo. And here also, I think it is surprising language for a text, like a legal text about giving. You must open your hands and lend him sufficient for whatever he needs. And some of the halacha that comes out of that is like, if someone is accustomed to eating meat once a week, you shouldn't just give them oatmeal, but you should make sure that they have what they need to feel like themselves. Obviously within reason, but that's the idea.
Makes it different, but it's interesting. The Hebrew is what he lacks.
You
know, you're supposed to, yeah. Sorry.
No, I think that's fair, yeah. Right? And that I think also makes it about a community standard, right? Mm-hmm. Like, does he lack meat? Or if no one eats meat, then maybe he only lacks oatmeal, right? But if everyone else is eating meat on Shabbat, then he lacks meat on Shabbat too. So yeah, I think it's subjective, and there's a lot about emotion here. I had a yoga teacher once who said that like when your hands are open to give, then like it's open to receive as well. And when you like close your hands against other people, then you are not open to receive either. And I think there's like something about that opening your hands for someone, that there's like something about that feels meaningful. So what I want to do is look at two different paradigms for thinking about giving. And the first is from the Rambam, from the Mishnah. And he outlines 8 levels of tzedakah. And I used to teach this to high schoolers, and I would cut the levels up on the paper so you couldn't tell like how they were ordered, and I would make them sort of order them however they thought was the best. Which is to say, there are lots of different ways to do it, and I don't think that this is the obvious way. And then we're going to go backwards in time to look at a text that challenges the way the Rambam organizes his levels. He obviously knew the Gemara that tells a different story, but we're starting with the Rambam because he's a little bit more, I think he's clearer in his thinking. So there are 8 levels of tzedakah, and I heavily redacted the text here because it was very long. So there, sometimes the Rambam explains or mentions like a, case in the Gemara or something like that. And we're not even going to read every word here. And maybe some people are familiar with the levels, but the first level, the greatest, higher than all the rest, is to machzik beyad Israel, is to strengthen the hand of a fellow Jew here, and to give him something that is more than just the gift of tzedakah, but to give him partnership or to find him work or to give him some kind of loan until, right, there's like it kedei lechazek et yado ad shelo yitzarech lebriut lishol, right, that there's like you get him to a place where he's not going to need to ask anymore, right? This is the like give a man a fish he eats for that night, teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime, right? This is the Rambam's highest level. And this is why things like the Hebrew Loan Society, like that, this is their founding principle, right? Is that they're helping people become self-sustaining and having maybe the dignity that comes from that. Then if you're going to go one level down to a level 7, right? This is one who gives tzedakah and the giver does not know to whom he gives and the receiver does not know from whom he receives, right? So this is a double blind. This is like if the rabbi calls you and says, there's someone who needs help, making Thanksgiving this year, can you please give something? And then the rabbi calls the person who needs help and says, look, I have a little extra, can I help you, right? You don't know that you gave, and the person who gave doesn't know who they got from. I imagine, although everyone is welcome to jump in, that this is like, right, this is about embarrassment. You don't want to pass someone that you know needed help on the street and have to like pretend you don't know. And you don't want to be in the position where you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to see Monica because I'm going to be so embarrassed that she knows I needed help with Thanksgiving dinner, right? And so the double blinds like erases that discomfort and embarrassment on both sides. Then one level below that is when the giver knows to whom he gives, but the poor person still doesn't know who he's taking from. Right, and so this is a situation where, right, the rabbi calls you and says, look, the Keller family really needs help. Can you give something? But then they call me and they say, look, someone helped me help you. Don't worry about it. Right, which I think means to the Rambam, he feels like it's more embarrassing to be the receiver than the giver, right? It's more important for the receiver to have like sort of that level of anonymity so that he doesn't have to feel beholden to the person who gave to him. And the Rambam points out in this ellipses that this only works when you have like a really good tzedakah system in your shul, right, or your community. Because if you don't trust the person who acts as the middleman, then there could be corruption. Maybe he says they need $100 and then he says, oh, I got you $70, right? Like if something got lost along the way. Then we get to the next level down. And this is where the one who gives tzedakah and the giver knows to whom he gives, but the poor person does not know from whom he takes. Is that the one I just read?
The next one.
Right. Oh, sorry. I do want to look at this last line of this one though, right? Such did the great sages who would go in secret and throw money into the doorways of the poor. So we're going to circle back to that idea of these gedolei hachachamim that would go in secret and leave money on poor people's doorsteps. Then the level below that is when the poor person knows from whom he takes, but the giver does not know to whom he gives, right? So you start a fund and someone else administers your funds and the poor person knows the name of the fund, right? The Keller Family Trust, but I don't know which specific person was getting from it. In the old days, a less sophisticated model, right, is that the sages would tie coins to their garments and then sort of let them trail behind. And then someone could run up and like take off the bag of money and run away. Just like a funny model thinking about giving tzedakah. Right, maybe like a less advanced way today would be to say, I'm leaving a box of challahs on my porch. If you need one, please feel free to come and take one, right? I'm not going to come outside today. Then we're assuming that now we know each other, right? Now both parties know each other in the level lower. And so here it's when you give before the other person can ask, right? If you both have to see each other, better to just say, look, I see you need some help. I made you some chicken soup, than to have the person come to you and say, I'm really hungry. Can you help me? Right? And then of course, the level after that is to give after being asked. And then after that, right, level 6 or 7 is to give with kindness, right? Sever panim yafot, but still having been asked first. And then of course the lowest level is if someone asks you and you're like, oh, well, I guess I have to, right? Very begrudgingly. So I guess before we move to the story, like, is that something, like, do you feel like the Rambam's principles work out well? Would you change them? Is this how you would have ordered them?
I mean, I've seen these before, but I've always wondered, like, these things are not mutually exclusive. Like, you can begrudgingly give it anonymously, you know, and things like that. And I've always wondered especially like the highest level. Like the highest level to me is like very strange because it's almost like not anything to do with the other ones at all. And you know who it is and they know who you are. But
and why does that one single out a Jew, but the other ones don't? Why does that one you have to fortify a Jew? And the other ones.
It's a really good question. I would assume the Rambam is generally thinking about Jews and non-Jews, like that's sort of like the generic. But it's also possible that the Rambam feels like you should prioritize that highest level with Jews.
The other thing is, in the one where the next one down, you give to someone and they don't know, you don't know who you gave it to, they don't know who they got it from. I feel like it's, in addition to being about embarrassment, it's also holy because it's just, you're saying you don't need to be recognized.
Right, there's like a lishma element to it. You're just doing it to give. You're not doing it to get your name on a building or to get anyone to be great. That's, yeah, I think that's great. I also think that the first one, maybe you don't need that blind element because it's not as embarrassing, right? It's like meant to be a dignified process.
Right, and it's interesting to me that is even considered tzedakah. Because there's not actually like money being moved over.
It's like that, does anyone else loan through, like, I think it's called the Keva Society or something?
I've heard of it.
You give, I think it's called Keva. You give, we do it, but Will is in charge, so I haven't done it in a long time, but you give $25. And then when someone pays you back, like from like Afghanistan or South, Africa somewhere, you can re-loan it out or not. It doesn't matter. Like, you don't make any money, but your $25 gets like recycled.
Wow. That's
It's
cool.
kind of fun. And you can like look at all these crazy projects of like, women making jewelry or people farming or it's, I'll see if I can find the link. So like it is tzedakah in the sense that like you did give them something no bank would have given them, right? Like no one else was willing to put out that kind of capital, but yes, you get it back. It's true.
Yeah.
Like imagine if you took someone under your wing, right? It like works better in apprenticeships, I think, right? Like someone who wouldn't have gotten in to that program, and you sort of do it outside the program.
Right.
It's giving of time and knowledge, which doesn't feel like tzedakah, but I think is like, I think that that's a big.
But you could also be giving him a loan or a gift.
True. I think that the gift is like woodworking tool, right? Like it seems to me like it has to be like something, right? Because otherwise, how would the gift sustain you further? But I don't know.
Well, a loan so you could buy.
Yes, the loans, yeah. Linda, I'm not trying to single you out, but I just feel badly that you're far away. If you have any idea.
Keep going.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, I do think that it's interesting to think about a begrudging, like blind donor. Is he really better? Like which level counts more for him?
Yeah.
Begrudging blind donor is a very interesting one. But you could be it. Like, let's say you have to give money. The Federation asks you for money, you really don't want to give him if you don't like the Federation. But if you're going to do it, you're going to do it anonymously. But you're just going to begrudgingly give it.
Or people who like give like because of like tax sheltering, right? Like they don't really want to give the money away, but they don't want the government to take it either.
But begrudgingly is the lowest level.
Right.
It doesn't overlap with the other ones.
Or
That's the,
combine it. But
Well,
doesn't?
then it's saying,
What if it does?
right? Like, what if you're the next highest level under the face-to-face
I think
level?
if you do it begrudgingly, you're still at the bottom line.
automatically
Yeah,
puts you
I
at the
agree. I think so too.
Elsewhere in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam says, which I don't agree with this on like a giving policy level, but he says if you have $1,000, better to give 1,000 times like once a day for 1,000 days, because it keeps the feeling of giving in your heart. And so I feel like he would agree with you, Mark, right? Like if you're begrudging, then forget it. Like his whole idea was about cultivating a sense of giving.
Yeah.
But it's much more impactful to give $1,000 to one place than $1 to 1,000 places.
Maybe not.
Especially if there's credit card fees for each transaction.
Yes, the Rambam didn't know about such things. Okay, so these are the levels as the Rambam understands them. But now we're going to look at my favorite character in the Gemara, Mar Ukba and his wife, who I will call Mrs. Ukba, although I don't know exactly what you would call her, Dr. Ukba. So this is a great story. I'm going to read it here, so I'm not leaning into the screen like that. Right, so the Gemara relates an incident. They're telling a bunch of stories, as the Gemara often does. They like clump a category of stories together, and these are all about tzedakah. And so this story is great, right? Marim ukba hava anya b'shuvudute dahava regil kol yoma deshade le arba'a zuze b'tinura dedasha. Right, so Mar Ukba had a poor person in his neighborhood, and every day Mar Ukba would toss 4 dinars, 4 coins to him in the slot under his door. So right, so that level, this scenario is, I think, that scenario of level, right, 876, right? The great sages who would go in secret and throw money into the doorways of poor people, right? I think like the Rambam is talking about Mar Ukba, I think.
But doesn't he know? I'm sorry, which one? Oh, I see. Right, the one who knows he's giving it to, right?
Right. So Mar Ukba knows the poor person he's giving to, but the poor person never knows who Mar Ukba is the idea. Right. And in fact, that seems to bother him, right? Yom Achad, Amar Ezil Ichze Man Ka'avar Bi Hahu Tebuta Hahu Yoma, Nahagale Lamar Ukba Labe Midrashe, Ata Tevetu Ahade. Right. So one day the poor person says, I want to go and see who's doing this for me. And it was that day that Mar Ukba was delayed in his learning in the Beit Midrash, and his wife came with him to distribute the tzedakah. So right, so now the scenario is that they're both Mar Ukba and Mrs. Ukba are going to the door together, and the person is like waiting to see if he can figure out who it is. So Kevan Dechaze, when the people in the poor man's house, right, saw that someone was coming, Dekamatzele Ladasha, Nafak Batraihu, Ruhut Mekaime Alaihu Lahahu Atuna, Zahaba Grupa Nura, Hava Ka Mikailian Ka'are Damar Ukba. Okay, so the person comes running out, but the Mar Ukba and his wife run away because they don't want the poor person to see them. And they entered into this furnace whose fire was already raked over. So it's not like a live burning fire, but there are still
How did
coals.
Mar Ukba come? I thought Mar Ukba wasn't there.
No, I guess like Mar Ukba normally goes on his own at like, let's say like 5, but his wife came at like 5:30 to pick him up. And so they ended up going together that day.
Okay.
That was with him, yeah. I thought that was with him.
It's a good question, like why his delay made his wife come out, but in this story it does. And they ended up in this place where there's this fiery furnace with like sort of hot burning coals. And here we see that Mar Ukba's legs are being burned. And so his wife says to him, Amri le debaitu, shekol karayach otev akarai, right? Why don't you put your legs on my legs? And so the understanding here is that her legs are not being burned because she is more worthy. And this makes Mar Ukba a little bit jealous. Chalash da'ate, right? He becomes distraught. Amrale, and she feels bad to him, right? Bad for him. Like here, her big husband who's all puffed up and is like feeling deflated. Don't worry, honey. Like the reason that I am better, right? Ana shechachina begava debaita umekarva ahanaiti. Right, I am normally inside the house. So when I give my tzedakah, it's ready and immediate. And this is like Rashi's explanation, this Sfaria explanation, insofar as I distribute actual food items. Since you distribute money, which is not as readily helpful, my aid is greater than yours. So again, that part is like Rashi's explanation, but I think it's possible to say that the reason that she is better is because she is in the house. So when someone comes to her house, the giver knows the receiver and the receiver knows the giver. right? In Mar Ukba, he's very careful to maintain anonymity, but she's saying, well, I'm in the house. I can't maintain anonymity. Like I have to be the
But isn't
person who
that
gives.
less of a level?
Yes, the Rambam places it less. And so I think that there is sort of this, and it's like not really on the haloket, right? Because it's across thousands of years, but there's this tension that the Rambam knew this story. And I think that the story, in my opinion, is like pretty clear that Mrs. Ukba, who is at a lower level on the Rambam's chart, is actually higher in the Gemara. That there's this tension here where the Rambam is saying, but I don't ascribe to that, right? And I find this story very compelling, not just because I love that, and like Mrs. Ukba is like the miracle worker here, and like their funny conversation afterwards. But I think that there's something about that idea that like when someone comes to my house and I just give from my house, that is a higher level in some way that the Rambam was like not considering, right? Because the Rambam is very careful about, I think, that like this anxiety that they'll be embarrassed if they know who gave to them, and that's why Mar Ukba runs away. Like he's not a bad guy, right? Like he's a good guy doing a good thing, and I think that's why he's like so genuinely distraught when he realizes his way isn't the best way, because he's been trying so hard to do level 6, and then he finds out like, oh, I could have been doing level 5. Right?
Could it be that all 7 levels below the top one are talking about monetary? And so that Mar Ukba doesn't fit into it's a different category because it's not monetary. The wife, Dr. Ukba, is giving food, whereas other ones just says Tzedakah, which.
Oh, like she doesn't fit in his, yes, that is certainly how Rashi and Sefaria read it.
Okay.
I agree with you. But I think that's interesting too, right? Why shouldn't this immediate assistance? In that way, the Rambam misses something even bigger, right? Because he forgets Mrs. Ukba's level altogether.
I mean, I think there also could be something that like when your name is plastered on the walls of the synagogue, it might make other people also want their names plastered. And so they would like, there could be that there is a usefulness to those things in that other people will then give. So when you see the person and they see you, other people see that happening more than just like a quiet under the table tzedakah that nobody else sees. It's good for the person, but is it good for the whole society? I don't know.
Definitely. Right. I think there are lots of reasons we put names on
something
walls.
last night, it was all our Jewish friends. It was the names or whatever, Frankel and who else.
Right.
Oh, we have a big fan, Herman
Davidson.
Yeah, it was all those people. And then there was one that said anonymous. They have the 10 million, the million, or the 100 million, the 10 million, and the million people. And only one of them was anonymous. That was interesting.
Yeah. Look, leverage is like a serious thing, right? If you can call and say, look, I already put in my 100 million, where's yours, right?
I think the food component is very interesting also. Is it better to give food
Well, it says. I mean, that's
than money?
That's
to
how
a
Rashi
homeless
would
person?
interpret.
Right. I do think
Yeah.
that it should be clear that like that is not in the direct text. But yes, I agree that I do think the food is right. Like we only give food when we're downtown. Like we won't give money to anyone on the street. We'll only give food because we feel like we don't know how the money's being used, right? Like there's something actually a little
Or
bit
is it like when you have
pure,
food, they come into your house and then you talk to them and it's more of like,
human.
yeah.
Mhm.
So then there's another level of tzedakah there. It's, you're engaging with them in a way that you're not just throwing money at them.
Right. I think there is something like a little shameful about throwing money at someone's door and running away. And I think that sometimes we don't, like the giver doesn't always think about the receiver's experience of something, right? Like people who give clothes that like are so dirty or stains that like they would never wear, right? Like I always wonder, like, who are you envisioning will want to put this on their body, right? Like the shame component. Mar Ukba certainly wasn't thinking about that person's experience in the same way. And I do think inviting someone into your home is like the highest level, right? In some ways, because there's like an element of trust and making you feel like you're like just like all the other friends who come into your home, right?
You're exposed.
Yeah. Yes, that's a big one. Right, Mar Ukpa definitely protects himself on some level by not letting anyone know. And that also, I think sometimes that is what, like, right, like once you give to someone, then they like come back for asking for more and more and more. And so there is like that piece where you do want to protect yourself, but. Yeah, I think that, I think that the Mar Ukpa story is not like written as halacha. And the Rambam is definitely trying to like organize a society around these principles. But I think that it's a good tension to think about, right? That like the Rambam doesn't take everything into account when thinking it through. Awesome. So I did want to like zoom back out before we ended, because again, this felt like very micro. And to think about tzedakah, not just about the givers and receivers, but about like the framing, how important it is. So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs told this story in the book To Heal a Fractured World, which is a beautiful book. I highly recommend. And he talks about the Kamaker Rebbe. Will was like, do you think that he's related to?
I was just thinking
I
that
don't
when you
think
said
so.
that.
I don't know.
They don't spell it the same way. Well,
I
because we don't know how it's spelled.
They're probably in the same town or whatever.
I
right?
guess.
What do you
I don't
think,
know.
Mark?
Maybe
Yeah,
they're
I don't know.
related. Do you know, Linda, as the mother of a renter?
No.
Doesn't have an N though. Kamaker.
Oh, is it? Oh, probably
There's an
not.
N? Kamaker?
Yeah.
Well, then they're definitely related.
We'll have to ask them. We'll have to ask
Definitely.
them.
I'm not related. I mean, that's a
They're
neighboring
probably from the
city in
same town,
Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, maybe he knew this guy. Like his great grandfather knew the Kamaker. He doesn't come out so great in the story, so maybe
Okay.
they're not related. So the Kamaker Rebbe, right, once resolved to devote a whole day to reciting Tehillim, which apparently is a very common practice in some communities where they recite Tehillim. Like I've met a few in my Maharat ways. There's a word for it in Yiddish that I can't think of right now. A kavater. Someone who recites Tehillim all day. So the Kamaker Rebbe was doing that. And towards the evening, he was still reciting. He was like close to the finish line, right? And a messenger came to tell him that his mentor, the Maggid of Tzidnov, wanted to see him. And the Rebbe says he'll come as soon as he's finished. But then the messenger returned, saying that the Maggid insisted that he come immediately. When he arrived, the Maggid asked him why he had delayed, right? He's like annoyed. The Rebbe explained that he had been reciting Tehillim, like probably expecting this big pat on the back. And the Maggid told him that he had summoned the Rebbe to collect money for a poor person in need. And so the Maggid continued, Psalms can be sung by angels, but only beings can help the poor. Charity is greater than reciting Psalms because angels cannot perform charity. So this tension of like what angels can do and what they can't and what humans can do is like very common in the Gemara and like Hasidic stories. But I think this idea that like this is like a holy task. It's not like just to keep society running or just to be nice or just to fulfill the mitzvah of giving tzedakah, but that there's something very like unique and distinctly human about giving and taking that makes it a more special mitzvah on some level.
Doesn't this